I remember having a conversation with a coworker a couple of years ago. His on and off girlfriend left him once again because she wasn't sure what she wanted and she needed some time to think. And he was really struggling. He didn't know how to get over her. I found the way he spoke about her fascinating. He kept talking about how extremely attracted he was to her and that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever met. And then when he described the physical intimacy they had, it sounded like something out of this world. It was, in his words, the most beautiful and the most intense experience of his life. Later on, I read a book about addiction by Gabor Mate, and I was struck by how similar this sounded to the way heroin addicts describe their highs, the intensity, the craving, the sense of something almost transcendent. There was a strange overlap between how he spoke about this relationship and how addicts speak about substances. And this is not a coincidence. Welcome back to Gentle Within. This season on this channel, we are exploring how and why people fall in love. And in today's episode, we're going to look at the biological side of it, why infatuation can behave like a real neurochemical addiction. To understand this, we need to talk about one of the most powerful systems in the human brain, the dopamine system. Most people think that dopamine is a pleasure chemical, but it's not entirely accurate. Dopamine is not primarily about pleasure. It is about motivation, anticipation, and pursuit. It's the chemical of wanting, not necessarily liking. It drives us toward things that feel rewarding or that we believe will be rewarding. And the distinction is crucial because it explains why romantic obsession can feel so intense, even when the relationship itself is not really fulfilling. In the early stages of infatuation, the dopamine system becomes highly activated, but importantly, it's not stable pleasure that creates the strongest dopamine response. It is uncertainty. When rewards are unpredictable, dopamine activity actually increases. This is called intermittent reinforcement. And it's the same principle that makes gambling machines so addictive. If you knew exactly when you would get a reward, the system would quickly lose its grip. But when reward is unpredictable, sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't, the brain stays in a heightened state of anticipation. And now think about romantic dynamics. The person is sometimes available, sometimes distant, sometimes warm, sometimes withdrawn. Sometimes they respond quickly, sometimes they disappear. Sometimes you feel deeply connected and sometimes completely cut off. The emotional unpredictability is not just psychologically painful, it's also neurochemically powerful. The brain begins to track the other person like a reward system. Every message, every sign of attention, every moment of closeness becomes a kind of hit. And every moment of distance creates withdrawal-like tension. Over time, this creates a cycle that looks very similar to addiction. Craving increases when the person is absent. Relief comes when they return, and the relief itself reinforces the craving even more strongly the next time. But dopamine is only one part of the story. The body also reacts strongly to emotional uncertainty through another system, the stress system. When someone we are attracted to becomes unavailable or unpredictable, the brain activates the stress response and cortisol rises. Heart rate increases. The body enters a state of alertness, almost as if something important is being threatened. And biologically speaking, our attachment system interprets this connection as danger. This means that in certain relationships, love and stress begin to mix together. The same person who triggers anxiety can also trigger relief. The same relationship that creates tension can also create moments of intense comfort. And this combination, dopamine-driven craving plus cortisol-driven stress, creates a powerful loop. The nervous system becomes highly activated, constantly swinging between longing and relief, tension and release. In contrast, when the person becomes available again, another system activates, the bonding system. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, increases during physical closeness, touch, and it creates feelings of trust and safety and attachment. It's one of the chemicals that makes us feel emotionally bonded to another person. So in these intense relationships, you often get a powerful biochemical cocktail: dopamine driving craving and obsession, cortisol driving stress and emotional urgency, and oxytocin creating moments of deep bonding and attachment when connection is restored. Over time, this creates something very important: emotional reinforcement. So the nervous system begins to associate love not with calmness or stability, but with intensity, unpredictability, and emotional volatility. This is also why secure relationships can sometimes feel unfamiliar or even overwhelming for people who are so used to this cycle. Stable connection does not produce the same dopamine spikes or cortisol swings. It does not create the same dramatic emotional highs and lows. But what it lacks intensity, it often replaces with regulation, safety, and long-term stability. What we often call chemistry is not really a sign of compatibility or love. A lot of the times it's a sign of a nervous system that has learned to associate love with activation rather than peace. That doesn't mean that romantic love is just biology. Human relationships are shaped by memory, meaning, attachment, history, personality, and consciousness. But the biology helps us understand why certain patterns feel so powerful and why they can be so difficult to break. Because sometimes what we experience as love is not really connection, it's anticipation, it's stress and relief, and it's the nervous system trying to regulate itself through another person. And once you see that clearly, it becomes much harder to confuse intensity with intimacy. Please remember, just because you feel so intensely about someone, that doesn't mean you should actually be with that person. So today we explored something that is closely related to the concept of limerence. And limerence is a very intense and often toxic form of infatuation. It's characterized by obsessive thinking, emotional dependency, and a strong need for reciprocity from one specific person. Over time, in limerence, that person is no longer experienced as they truly are, but as a mental image that we become deeply attached to and can't let go. And this internal image begins to regulate our emotional state, our sense of hope, anxiety, and meaning. And it becomes extremely difficult to let go of. Limerence is especially common in people with childhood trauma, especially when these early relational wounds can be linked with dissociative coping strategies where emotional intensity is managed through dissociation, fantasy, detachment, internal escape. And this is why limerence can feel so powerful. It's not just attraction towards another person, it's an attempt to regulate unresolved emotional states through them. I will be making several videos on limerence because I think understanding these patterns can completely change the way we see love and relationships. But if you found this interesting, feel free to subscribe. I release new videos almost every week, although sometimes I skip a week because I'm currently working on my master's thesis, which, by the way, is on infatuation. Let me know what you think in the comments, if this was helpful or not. I'd love to interact with you, and I'll see you very, very soon.